Good morning, class. How are you all doing? Good. That's good to hear. So before we get into anything new, I want to review what we learned last time I had you guys. So, before we get started, what is the difference? Can anyone tell me the difference between monocots and dicots? Yes, Randy.
One's got like the one seed and one has two seeds.
Exactly, yeah. So one has a one seed part, and then another has, the dicots have the two seed parts. If you want to think of it, have an example in the back of your mind. It's monocots are like corn seeds and dicots are like bean seeds. Just kind of give you an example. What are some uses of plants that we discussed? We discussed a few. Does anyone? Yes, Shelby.
Medicine.
Yes. Lexi.
Food.
Yes. Okay. Anything else? Yes, Shelby. Yes, excellent. We also use them for clothing. We use them for fuel sources. So there's immense number of uses for plants that we have. What is a characteristic of a vascular plant? Or what is something that vascular plants have that avascular plants don't have? Yes. Yes, and that's found in their stems. So, Ryan's on a roll over here. So what's a characteristic of an avascular plant? If it doesn't have the means to get water from its roots to the top, it's going to have to be really short. So avascular plants are going to be things that are close to the ground, so like mosses and things like that. Whereas the vascular plants can't have that ability to be really tall, like trees and things like that. So, all right. Before we get started, I want to tell you our SOL that we're looking at today. It's Bio 4, and the key here is going to be knowing the difference, the structures and variations and functions varying amongst the eukaryotic kingdoms of protists, fungi, plants, animals, and also humans. So we're just going to be broadly looking at this. We're going to focus specifically on plants today, but that's kind of the broad category that it falls under. All right, so we're going to look at flowers. So the beautiful parts of plants, I think that plants are beautiful, all parts of them, but most people think of the flower as really the most beautiful part. So there are the petals, which people think of immediately when you think of flowers, but outside there are the sepals. And can anyone think of a use for the sepals? What kind of things do you think the sepal does? The part that just outside. Yes, Shelby.
Maybe it's structured.
Yeah, it kind of supports the petals a lot of times. It also, when the bloom is closed, those sepals are going to wrap around the petals and protect them so the flower is not being damaged. And really the most important part are the reproductive organs, which are divided into the female and the male. So the male, the large term that kind of refers to all of it is the stamen, and that's broken up into the filament, which is kind of like the stem part of it, if you want to think of it that way, and then the anther, which is where the pollen is actually produced. And then the female part of it is all of it is the carpel, but then at the very top you have the stigma and then the style, and within the style there's that pollen tube, and that goes down to the ovary, which has the ovules inside. And so pollen from the anther will be deposited on the top there, on the stigma, will travel down the pollen tube to the ovules and fertilize those, and then those ovules that are fertilized will develop into seeds, which then will further the process. So to kind of give you an idea and break it down, we have, I just kind of separated them to help with the visual. The male parts are the parts that produce the pollen and the supporting structures, so that filament and anther group together under the stamen. And then the flower, the female parts are the carpel and broken down then into the stigma, style, ovary, and ovules. So does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, so beyond that, there are the accessory parts, and those are the corolla and the calyx. The calyx is the sepals. That's kind of collectively refers to each of the individual calyx sepals, and then there's the corolla, which refers to collectively all of the petals. So these terms, I'm throwing them out to you. There are a lot of different terms. You will be responsible for these, so just be aware of that. So there are all these different parts and structures and things, but the action that happens with these is pollination. And pollinators, they are very key for transporting that pollen to the female part of the flower. And so it's super important to have those for a flower's reproductive cycle. If they don't have pollination, they can't reproduce. And so I have some listed up here, some different pollinators. Can anyone think of any other potential pollinators that I missed? Yes, Ryan. Yes. As humans seek to develop new flowers and new species and variances, they'll use Q-tips and other devices to selectively pollinate flowers. So yes. Anybody else? Yes. They do. Yes. Yes. I'd say yes. They would probably fall under birds, but yeah, specifically hummingbirds. They're kind of the main one. Most other birds are a little bit too large to be able to effectively pollinate. Anybody else? Has anyone heard of a hummingbird moth? So it's like a combination of the two. It is actually a moth. It comes out in the day, so it's a little bit odd, but it's a cool insect. If you have time, look it up later. They're kind of funky looking, but they're cool. So there's a difference between flowers that are going to be pollinated by insects and other animals and things, the birds and bats and things like that, and then flowers that are going to be, their mechanism of pollination is wind and water. So the insects, flowers that depend upon insects and other birds and bats and things like that, they're going to need flowers which are going to attract the attention of those pollinators. And so they're going to have big, bright flowers, and they're going to also have an odor which will attract these, and nectar, because the insects have no motivation to pollinate the flowers unless they're producing nectar, which provides them with an energy source. And so it's kind of it's a motivation for the insects to come and visit these flowers. And also the stigma and style, which I haven't. So I have this nice model here, so I don't have to go back. So the stigma and the style here, they're going to be enclosed within the flower rather than being further out and kind of suspended out there. Does anyone have an idea of why that might be? No? Okay, so if you were pollinating and you are kind of, as a pollinator, you're going to be staying in around the plane of the flower here, and so you want to be able to get the pollen from the anthers here to the pistil here. So you want to the carpel there. And so you're going to want to keep this as the top, the stigma here, as close to the anthers as possible so that the transfer of the pollen is as easy as possible. However, if you are relying upon the wind or the water, you're going to need to have a big filamentous or feathery carpel, because you're going to need to catch as much airborne pollen as possible. So I have somewhere, here we go. We're going to do a dissection of a flower. Actually, so does anyone have an allergy to Lilies, potentially? No? Can you take one and pass one back? You do? Okay. All right. That's good. All right. Will it bother you? All right. So I've passed out those dissection worksheets, and I'm going to come around with the flowers. So grab one, just break it off.
I grab this whole thing?
Yep, just,
And break it?
yep, rip it off. Perfect. Break it off. Perfect. Oh, you got two. Two for the price of one. All right, here you go. There you go. All right, so you're going to just want to start pulling them apart, and you will, once you have each part of the flower all pulled off, you can bring it up to me. It has a strong smell, so what would that tell you about who's going to pollinate it? It's going to be pollinated by something that's, so once you have, there you go, there you go. Oops, so sorry. There you go. All right, so start pulling them apart, and I want you to attach to your sheet. Once you have each of the parts of the flower pulled off, lined up on your worksheet there, you can bring it up here and we can tape it. Sorry guys, I only have one thing of tape. It's a low budget film, sorry. So start working through that. Zach, if you would like to just sketch a flower on the back with the different labeling, the different parts. Sorry. You get the Here you go. All right, so yeah. So each of these, yeah, you can because it's so large, you can just kind of put it across each of those. So.
Is this the sepal, or is this
So the sepals, lilies are a little bit tricky because they don't really have sepals.
Okay.
If you want to, you can put one of the like the outer petals, which would act as they're going to be the outside
Oh, right, 'cause it's
protecting.
the under
Yeah.
okay,
So if
got
you
it.
want to put that in the sepal, yeah. How are you guys doing? Go ahead. Yes. Yeah. If you want to just pull out the whole thing and just kind of lay it across all of those 4 boxes. So just if you pull it out. So like that. And just lay it across like that. And we'll tape it there later. How's the flower coming?
I don't know.
It's looking good. Good work.
It's okay. Didn't realize it was gonna-
You could just, put pollen fingerprints on there. You guys want? All right, so you guys can continue working on that, but I want to conclude this lesson with just a reminder that these flowers, they're beautiful, but as Matthew 6:28 through 30 says, God clothed these flowers with so much beauty, but you guys, these flowers, they're here today and gone tomorrow. But God cares so much more for us. And so we have no need to worry about the necessities of tomorrow. God will provide for us. So I just want to leave you with that encouragement. I'm also going to leave you with this nice summative assessment. So fill this out and bring this back in tomorrow. And yeah, all I have for you today. Thank you so much.